All right, I'm gonna start fretting up. Truing up a board. Before we do that, I showed you the fret. These are for frets. This is what, when you take a piece of fret wire.
What size is that wire, Jason?
This is 80/40. It's not what I'm gonna put in this guitar. This is what I gotta put in the Taylor.
What do those numbers mean?
Okay. When I say 80/40, those are the measurements of your wire being.
Right there behind your bus.
Oh,
This up.
yes, thank you. All right, so your fret wire. Here we got some right here. We've got, when I say 80/40, the width here, from this point to this point, 80 thousandths of an inch, and then the height would be 40. That's standard Martin wire that they typically use in most Martins. Taylor uses it a lot. Taylor, some of them, they're 95 wide, 45. I've gotten where that's the wire that I like. Gibson's fretless wonders started out at 36 thousandths of an inch, and those were 106 wide. You can get even wider than that, up to like 110. These flush cuts, this is what their purpose in life is. That and pulling bridge pins and other stuff, pulling nuts. But to cut it flush as it can be to the fingerboard, and that's why the ends are ground. The other tool that's a must-have if you're doing refrets or even if you're building. This is the same. This is a mini version of this, and that's what I use to pull frets. And I've almost completely worn this one out. I've got another one in here that I don't like as much because I'm not used to using it. It looks almost identical, but it just feels different in my hand. And that was an old Craftsman that I found in a guitar case that somebody was using for clippers, but I ground the face of that. And you can use a bench grinder. You can buy one. You can get it close. I use the same sander, the table sander, and then we'll just hold it on there and actually grind it flat and then polish it out on sandpapers. So those work good. We have a fret tang expander. I'm gonna send a piece of fret wire around and everybody. This will do two different things.
I can get you close.
All right. Two different things it'll do. The top part of this will actually crimp the wire and make it wavy. It'll wave back and forth, so it'll expand it. And the harder you squeeze, the more it waves that tang. This part's the tang, the part that comes down. Now, if you want to flatten out a barb, you can take the other side of it. It looks like this. And then you can press there, and you can flatten out the barbs. Or you can go back and kind of flatten out whatever the wave that you put in there. What it's doing is making, when you put a wave, you'll see it. It's expanding the tang. It's not necessarily making it bigger, it's making it wavy, so it goes back and forth, so it'll fill a slot if you need to. I use this a lot when I press down, and let's say the centers aren't staying in, or the edges aren't staying down, then I can expand it in certain parts, and then squeeze the fret in or hammer it in. You can also use it to try to press out a neck within reason. So you are welcome to, while I'm talking, just go down that wire and squeeze
What
away.
would be the difference on a refret and a new build? Would you want to do one? Would you want to crimp or
A new build, I'm not gonna have to, because, unless you cut your slots too wide. Now, I used to slot them on fingerboards with a handsaw, and then at some point I decided I don't like slotting boards. So I usually buy them, unless it's a scale length that, I'm not gonna get. So if I'm buying gonna make a fender neck, then I'm probably just gonna buy a board. And then, unless it's out of a piece of wood that, specific, but I would end up buying in my shop, like 4 or 5 fingerboards and then choosing the one I want to, and then I've got other boards for other purposes or for another build that might match.
Where do you buy your boards from?
StewMac,
StewMax?
LMI will cut you whatever you want, and whatever radius within reason. They want radius, bird's eye maple. You want the
They will
radius,
not?
because they use a shaper, and it'll just blow that bird's eye out.
Squirrely grain.
Okay, so here's a file. That is what I used to use to make my beveled edge on the frets. Now recently, I've always done it that way, where on the side of my fingerboard, I want to grab this, I would just freehand it with that at a certain angle. But they make a tool for that. I just never had one until recently. And this goes down the side of your board like this. And it has a file that keeps you at the angle that you need to be for a bevel. And that's the easiest way to do that. The only drawback to it is this is one angle. I've got some customer, I got one customer that tells me when I refret his guitars to not put any bevel. They come straight and then just 90 degrees to the side. It's uncomfortable,
Yeah, okay.
but he can do a lot more vibrato on the high side and the low side because he's got a little more space.
Is one of those worth getting if you're starting out?
You can make one, really.
Well, yeah, you can make one of those, especially if you got in the guild. You got a bunch of jig guys. You got Jim. He likes to make jigs for everything.
Yeah.
Jim doesn't like to touch the guitar. He just wants to.
If you're doing like a refret on an old guitar, are you always replacing all the frets? Or do you do the first set and then that's all?
No, I'm gonna do a partial a day. I mean, I gotta tell you that there's no reason to. People will bring me guitars a lot, and they'll say, "I've got divots in the frets, like 1 through 5,"
Right.
and then they'll want me to dress the frets, like level them down to take the divots out. I'll measure that divot. If that divot's, let's say they got 80/40 wire, and that fret wire is gonna get down to 35 thousandths. 35 thousandths is getting into the fretless blunder range. We call them fretless blunders. Most people don't like them. That's when Gibson was making fret wire that was so low that, sometimes for some people it feels good, but most of us, we don't want a whole lot of fingerboard drag on the flesh of our fingertips. So I try to not dress. I don't want to dress everything on this board that hasn't been touched, because most of us aren't playing much past the 7th fret. Who was it? Elvis said there's no money past the 5th fret. But so I would opt to try to talk to them. Well, instead of dressing everything down to those lowest points, why don't we just replace those? And it's going to be about the same amount of work. And in some cases, maybe even cheaper. If you're good at pulling frets and putting them in, you can do it fairly quick. That's what I'm going to do with this Taylor. I don't want to dress all of his frets down to that point. I'm just going to replace probably the first 7 to the side 8. I don't get picky with how many. I'm in there doing the job. So, real quick before we start this, I'm going to glue this nut in. Then we're going to start putting frets in this guitar after I make sure the board is true. I got all these cute little bottles because I didn't want to bring a whole stash of stuff. And I found that I've been working out of this toolbox like this for a week trying to remember to put everything back to bring. And I really enjoyed putting everything in a small bottle and having one little, so I've learned a lot.
So what kind of glue is that?
This is Type Bond. I'm gonna put some on both edges, on the bottom.
So you just put a little down.
I put a little
You don't
bit.
have to major glue it in, right?
Yeah, I don't really want it in there.
Where'd you get that cute little bottle?
I got that at the Amazon.
Yes.
They have everything, and I feel guilty when I buy off of it, and I still do.
Why bother gluing it in?
Well, some, especially classical makers, some classical makers don't. They, they're just in there.
I had one of mine pop out one time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I glued it back in.
Yeah, but in some guitars, you're gonna have your break angles that go this way, and let's say your E string, your low E string, and your A strings are gonna have a little more tension, so a lot of times it'll kick it over the side. Classical makers sometimes get away with it because they pay real good attention to where the strings come off to those posts, and to keep everything in line. So by all means, if you can make a nut stay there without any kind of glue, then that's great. Make sure this is water and not the stuff Jay brought in. Now I'm just cleaning up the glue around there with a little bit of water.
And that's just water?
Yeah, it's just water. It's just
It wasn't ever.
So that's just Type Bond like you can get at Home Depot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do the numbers matter, type bond?
Yeah,
They do?
if you ever want to take it out, use original.
Okay.
Red label.
Yeah, always use red label. I mean, I say that like I've got experience with the other stuff. But I don't have any experience with other stuff, so I'm scared of it.
They're more waterproof.
All right, I'm gonna let that dry. Realistically, that would be dry enough to do it in 15 minutes, maybe even sooner.
It doesn't need clamp or anything?
If you did it right, you're fine. You're gonna have to clamp it.
We need to take a break before you get started, or?
Yeah.
How's everybody doing?
Yes.
Break wise.
Yeah, what time is it? Okay,